Alright, now that we've seen the more time-consuming way to sharpen a photograph, let's take a look at one of those real quick and dirty ways of sharpening an image. One of those ways that's really not an accepted practice, but one of which that works really, really well sometimes for objects that can accept a whole lot of sharpening. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to close this image up. I'm going to say don't save here, and I'm going to close that first image that we had there as well. I'm going to jump back into Bridge, and I'm going to this time select Neptune.jpg. I'm going to open this image up. I'm going to jump into full screen mode, and what I'm going to do with this image is I'm going to use a filter that you've probably never used before. So I'm going to first convert this to a smart object by right clicking or control clicking on the layer itself. I'm going to choose convert to smart object. Now if you've done this technique before, because this is a very popular technique, you'll notice that I'm not duplicating the layer. That's simply because of the fact that we're working in CS3. And I have the ability to run this filter as a smart filter, so I don't need that extra layer. If you're working in CS2 or CS, you would duplicate the layer and then do all of the steps that I'm about to show you here. So if you're working in CS3, this is the way that we're going to be doing it now, simply because it saves you a layer in the layers panel, and it's an easier way to work pretty much. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back up to the filter menu. I'm going to choose other, and I'm going to select high pass. Now in the high pass dialog box, what you're going to do is you're going to adjust your radius until you find that this is just a nice gray overlay of an image. You don't want a lot of color aspects coming through in this image, like these little highlights of blue and things that you see here, simply because of the fact that you want this to just outline the edges of this image. So once you have that, for this particular photograph, I think 8 pixels works nice for the radius. So I'm going to go ahead then and I'm going to click OK. And now you see here that I've totally ruined the photograph, right? And you're going to be thinking that I'm completely crazy for doing this. But if we come down here and we double click right here on this little icon to adjust the blending options of high pass, I can then go in here and I can change the blend mode of this filter. And this time I'm either going to change it to overlay or soft light. And you can change it to overlay for a more extreme effect. And if I show you, let me go ahead here and I'll click OK. Here's before. Let me zoom in just a little bit. Here's before and here's after. So you see there how it sharpens all of those edges of that image. Now this does affect a lot of the color portions of your image, so you will have the tendency to see some color halos here. So if you run into that problem, then you can go back in and you can change that blend mode to soft light, which is going to lessen the effect a little bit, and you can also adjust that opacity if you still feel like it is not exactly the correct amount of sharpening. That's the only drawback to using high pass sharpening, is the fact that you don't get a control over exactly how much it affects the image, simply because of the fact that it's a global adjustment. So I'm going to go ahead here, click OK, and then here we'll show you one more time. Here's the before of the original photograph, and here's the after of the high passed sharpened image. So remember, if you find that it's a little too extreme with the overlay blend mode, go ahead and go back in, change it to soft light. If it's still a little bit extreme for you, go ahead then and lower the opacity of that filter. That way you have a little bit better control over the amount of sharpening on the overall image. And the great part about this is, as we've always said, it's a non-destructive edit, and if at any time you feel like you need to go in and adjust those high pass sharpening settings, just double click on the word high pass. You'll be able to get in here to this dialog box, and you can adjust simply by dragging the slider back and forth like so. You'll be able to increase the amount of sharpening on the image or decrease the amount like that as well. So go ahead then, click OK when you're finished, and you have a nice sharpened image using only one single layer here inside of Photoshop.